Hey everybody, thank you. Yeah, Beckham, I think you're right. It's like as we keep doing this and we have the seasons and I'm like, oh yeah, it's LastCon time. Like that's great, right? And we have these moments and we start remembering things, and then it's also that realization hits in. It's like, man, I have known Beckham for a really long time. That's not good. I've known Josh for a really long time, and David. And it's like, oh geez, we're getting old, man. So like that's great. And I think there's some things in the slides that maybe will. Or in my talk that will kind of give some perspective of some thoughts that I've been thinking lately about DevOps, DevSecOps. I kind of built this talk to be a post-lunch talk, so you can kind of chill. Hopefully it's good. And hopefully there's some things that maybe will help you in your organization. Maybe there'll be things that spark interest for stuff you're working on, or give you the warning signs or things that you want to look for, or maybe if you have some extra ideas for me or things you see unfolding as kind of we take this perilous journey of DevSecOps and what that means in your organizations. I'd love to hear that. Like I'm trying to collect some of those things and just see how people are dealing with that. So. Thank you for having me here. Right now, I've started out on my own new adventure. I'm working on a startup called Dry Run Security. It's basically in stealth mode. There's really nothing out there about it, but I joke. I also teach on LinkedIn Learning, and I joke with my wife. I'm like, well, I give these like 30-minute talks, but then if people want to listen to like 12 hours of content, they can just go to LinkedIn Learning. And she's like, no one wants to hear that, And so, and I agree with her. But I teach some classes on DevOps, DevSecOps, infrastructure automation, CI/CD, all that kind of stuff. So, well, I think this kind of begs the question: is how do we do DevSecOps? Okay, so. I've got it's a really easy prescription here for you that's going to show you how to do this. These instructions will get you there. So first, you start off with security, and then you build DevSecOps. And it's great. It's like this has worked every single time at every organization we've tried it at. It's immediately DevSecOps success happens. And so I think that really gets us to thinking like, well, what do we mean when we say these words? Because like we have, part of that being old situations, like you start developing like, oh yeah, is it really just the same thing we were doing 5 years ago, but now we call it something new because we can get better pay, better jobs, new VC money. I don't know, right? So you start kind of internalizing this. We like to compare the things that we're doing from the past, and I've seen a variety of what people mean when they think about DevSecOps. I think it's important to think about like it's not security fixing DevOps. Much like it's not DevOps like fixing Agile. It's like an advancement of the craft of what we're trying to do. And so we think of DevOps as really DevSecOps is really the extension of DevOps, but for the benefit and for the inclusiveness of security being part of that pipeline. So, and you may hate the word DevSecOps. That's okay. Like it's like that's not a big deal. When DevOps first came out, people hated the words DevOps, and it was like there was a lot of debate about that. And should we even call it this? And like, can someone be a DevOps? And Patrick Dubois, the guy who coined the term DevOps, he gave a talk a little while ago. I guess it was in 2019, and he's like, we kind of learned that like it's okay whatever you call these things. Like it doesn't matter if you call it if you have like the DevOps or the DevSecOps or rugged DevOps, or you're calling it digital transformation or whatever. But like we are using these words to kind of show progress, and like there's a lot of the outcome is what we're shooting for. So. Okay, so how does that feel for everybody? Are we kind of good on the definition for DevSecOps? Can I see some hands or something? A shout out, a hurrah. Okay, got one hurrah. That's good. And a very muted hurrah from this side. Great. Cool. So why is DevSecOps not working? Why is it not working in many organizations? Would anybody say they've seen like, oh yeah, DevSecOps, it's doing really great. Like we're having we're having a lot of fun doing it at our organization. Any hurrahs for that? No? Okay. I mean, you can hurrah for that. All right, so interesting, right? Like, why would, like, that's the thing. That's what we're all talking about. yet why is it not working? One premise is like maybe security was never really invited into the digital transformation or into the DevSecOps or what have you there. Does anybody see that? Like the digital transformation kind of came and went in your organization, and like security just kind of got left on the side. I see hands for that. Now I see heads nodding, and okay, good, cool. And I think sometimes we'll see that where security will have this misseen notion that we're the heroes in the story, and that we're trying to. There is sometimes that idea we're trying to fix it, or we're left out, so now we got to go in and there's a lot of things that happen there. I like this quote in the Agile Application Security book, which I find is to be like a really good book for like how we're trying to think about it. When people say, oh yeah, we're thinking about doing like DevOps or DevSecOps or whatever, I'm like, well, just go read Agile Application Security. Like start there, right? Like that gives you a lot of ground to cover in real practical, pragmatic ways. But in it, they talk about how at many places, probably not like, it's a situation like preaching to the choir, probably not like the last con crowd, but maybe some of us in here as well. Like we have team members or teams that work with a worldview where our goal is to inhibit change as much as possible. And that's a real downer. I also include this quote. I've included it for like years because I find this to be incredibly interesting and helpful for us to frame the conversation on this. But in the book, The Tangled Web, in one of the openers, Michael says, security by risk assessment introduces a dangerous fallacy that structured inadequacy is almost as good as adequacy, and that underfunded security efforts plus risk management are about as good as properly funded security work. And I read that and immediately I was like, that does not sit well with me. I do not like that, right? So I want to make sure we got to have like, figure out the risks, we got to figure out how to deal with that. But like we still got to do like actual engineering work to make it better, not just to do actuarial duties. Okay, we're probably all like Swift on security, but security is less bleeding edge malware research and more project management for other people who don't report to you. I get some hurrahs and head nods out of that, right? It's like we've all been, yeah, hurrah, yeah, we've all dealt with that. And companies are spending. This one is kind of like another like premise. This came out a few years back, and I was like, this is Steve Blovin's got this figured out here. Companies are spending a great deal on security. But we still read of massive computer-related attacks and problems, and clearly something is wrong there in that equation. Like the root of the problem is twofold. It's like we're not protecting, or we're protecting the wrong things, and we're hurting productivity in the process. So, which to me is like that's a double damning statement for a group inside of a large organization, or for even like a discipline where it's like okay, at least if like the attacks are getting better and stuff slowed down, okay. But like in business, like everything's got to go faster. We need speed. That's what we're trying to do with digital transformation, anyways. So to slow down productivity, that's like that's almost a cardinal sin, right? In the transformation journeys here. So, and unsurprisingly, like security tools and the tool chains haven't really solved all the issues. I mean, we have the tool chains and the diagrams and every version of this that you've ever imagined. And so anyways, I started thinking like, what are some of the warning signs that I've seen or that I think are going on in the industry that we could sort of point out? And they're not exhaustive, and even some of the fixes don't necessarily correlate to all the warning signs, and all the warning signs in and of themselves may not really be a bad thing. Context is everything on all this stuff. So you'll have to do some like free thinking on this to figure out like, how bad is that for us? Like in my organization, like where does that land? So, okay. Also at this point, you might be wondering, COVID was rough for this guy, right? Like he's got a lot of Lego pictures. Like what was he doing during this whole time, right? Maybe, I don't know, maybe not thinking. Anyways, the kids aren't allowed to touch them. I mean, that's that, we all know that. Okay, I thought that was gonna be funnier. So I apologize, that's where we're at. So there's other talks going on at the same time. Security tools only being used by the security team. That seems like a common pattern where there could be a warning sign. I used to work at Signal Sciences. We would often find out like, oh, okay, who are the people that have access to your web app firewall? Oh, just like 1 or 2 security people. Oh, how come like the developers and the operations and the people that actually build a product, like how come they don't have any telemetry from that? And so, Signal Sciences kind of connected the dots for that. Other tools do that as well, of course. But like thinking in that new way of like, what's going on the wire defensively, being able to answer the question like, am I under attack at this moment? Well, the people who run and support your site should be able to know that, right? And I did some stuff with one of our customers at the time, and they were in fintech, and they're like, yeah, we didn't know, were we having like a massive account takeover thing? And anyways, they were able to work back to like what's going on in the business, and they were saying, oh, it looked like it was, but it wasn't. And we were able to make that understanding, we were able to come to that understanding really quickly because of wiring both kind of the system metrics and observability stuff and the security things together, and as well as like some of the business things that are happening. So being able to expose that data, I think that's prime target number 1 for security folks in the DevSecOps transformation. 2, looking, or kind of like 1A is like also kind of avoiding the hidden silo. I think we can also be in this state where we're like, oh, cool, that's like the DevSecOps tool or the DevSecOps team or the whatever, and then like we've just made a new silo, a new place to separate off. That's not unique to DevSecOps. That was a thing that we actually did in DevOps a lot. Like, I remember, speaking about how old we are, it's like 8 or 10 years ago, it's like, oh, great, we have a DevOps team. And you're like, cool. Boyd, I know, has seen a lot of this as well, where it's like, what does that really mean to you? Like, we would like try to go through that process of like, how did you think that was a good idea, right? Not saying that that you can't have models that work in that way, but you kind of dig deeper, and it's like they took the sysadmins, gave them a new title, and boom, like they're doing the DevOps, right? And it's like, you might have skipped some pages there in the digital transformation process, or whatever, whatever flavor of that brand you prefer at your organization. Number 2, okay, you have a change advisory board. Fair enough. Like if you have one of those, that's probably a warning sign that the DevSecOps transformation or digital transformation is not really working for you. See Visible Ops Gene Kim book. Okay, another one is security versus IT, or IT versus business. This kind of unfolds in many ways. I think it's often whenever you hear people around your organization start saying like, well, how does IT provide value for the business? It's like, ding, ding, that should maybe have some warning signs that you haven't really done the digital transformation. You're still kind of in this like service expense contractor model of IT. I have a recommendation for a book on that later. I'm trying not to problem solve all these just yet, but that's something to watch out for, because like that shows to me that IT is not really core to what the business is doing. It's sort of this contractual separated arm, and that's a real common one to have. Another one is your deploys to production take longer than 5 minutes. That may seem like a really short amount of time, depending on where you're at. And I know that can be, this is one of those like gray area, like could it be a warning sign? Maybe not, but developers like psychologically, or not psychologically, that's not the right word, but we start making trade-offs at like what we're gonna commit and how we're gonna work with the system at about 5 to 10 minutes. So different studies show different things on this, but 5 minutes is a pretty good barrier. But like once it starts getting too slow to run the deploys, we start saying, okay, let's see, let's commit all these stuff together, we'll batch it all together. Oh, let's wait till the end of the day to deploy that. And then like that turns into, well, deploys are taking an hour, so let's do that weekly or something. We start kind of gradually devolving into this kind of state where even though we may have the skills and the technology and it's software and it should theoretically be easy to deploy changes in software, we continue to make it harder by batching all these things and adding more complexity together at the same time. This crowd probably knows this, right? Like, is compliance and audit time, is it painful? Of course, there's always a bit of pain associated with this, or a bit of process associated with it. But like, are people, it's like compliance time is like everybody putting in their notice for vacation and trying to get out of Dodge, or like people like, oh, I'm quitting, and going somewhere else. I know several people in our field that are like, yeah, I'm going through like several audits and I'm gonna quit. It's like, well, fair. I've been there, right? There's a time I was going through PCI and I was like, I think I didn't really like this company. I think I might quit, right? Because this is pretty horrible. So, cool. I don't know, is that resonating? Are any of these resonating, or is anybody's like, this guy's what's talking about? It's kind of bright, so. We'll assume all is good, or hopefully I haven't made anybody too upset. And then there's also the scan everything fantasy and trying to secure all the things, and that takes many forms. Okay. So those are some of the warning signs, and now what do we do if we say, oh, we really want to do DevSecOps. We really want this to be kind of a new way that we're going to do work. I mean, come on, the Lego pictures are, you're like, there's a lot, there's quite a few. This is getting weirder, right? Good. So first we have to identify the people ratio, the people mismatch ratio, and the silos inside of an organization. So also this has been published many times over now, but the 100 developers to 10 operations to 1 security person, that is a model that just is not really a scalable model. And so if you're thinking, even sometimes where we're like, oh, we'll do this the embedded security program, maybe like you got to experiment with how this is going to work, because as we all know, like we don't have enough security people to fill the seats that we do have. So like, we're not going to change this through like just hiring. Probably, not going to change this any other way than like really, figuring out ways where like security gets brought into the process and is bringing the automation and the tooling and other pieces and processes in. So, oh yeah, and here's a book that I recommend. If you find yourself in that model, that one problem where it's like, well, we're always talking about like IT adding value and not being part of the business or whatever. If you find that, I would recommend this book, A Seat at the Table. Kind of discusses like how to go through that if you're undergoing digital transformation, or if you're being left out of the digital transformation in IT, or I think we can also apply it into security. Then this would be really helpful for you to read and check that out. Okay, number 2, building DevSecOps people, or kind of focusing on the ways that each part of the dev and the sec and the ops can like learn how to play together and coexist in a meaningful way. So I think for security, this is a message that's probably to this crowd not too unfamiliar, right? This is the Jason Chan Netflix model of build the paved road. I know many people in this room have already thought about this and already working on some of these things, like making security normal, making security free if you're using that part of the system. It was interesting that it took a company like Netflix to help us kind of popularize this idea, where a company that essentially has no rules and no processes, and it's like just Wild West, really. But then they said, well, if you use the main paved road, you're good. If you don't, you're going to have a problem. But that idea has really taken root, where if you're a developer and you're like, I want to get security, well, I want to get it for free. We even see like our, places like GitHub and GitLab and stuff, they're baking security in to as much as possible. We can give security free, just as part of the developer's experience inside of our organizations. That's a win. So security, look for opportunities to do that, right? Take old tools, find new tools, find new ways to make those connections. Message I like to tell to developers is like, find application hooks where you can hook into security. So whether that's through like feature flagging, or or you have like certain URIs that kind of like give you some extra telemetry on the application. Make sure that they're self-running. Make sure your self-running baseline tooling kind of like pull from the security team instead of waiting till a later date where you're like told like, oh yeah, you have these like cross-site scripting or whatever vulnerabilities that you might have. Instead, like at least know, hey, by the time I get my app out the door, I'm good for like a baseline of stuff. Like I know that I don't have like secrets baked in, and I've run some just off-the-shelf scanners or something like that, right? So that's what developers can work for. And then to operations, looking for ways to add that telemetry into the observability stack. I gave that little example of how we were doing that at Signal Sciences, to think about how to wire those together. Of course, like Contrast and other folks are doing that as well. But it is a way to inside of your metrics, and whether you're looking at your Datadog dashboard or whatever, but you're also able to see like, oh, scans that are being run, attacks that have been fired. Like you're able to kind of put all that into the I guess with IT, really, I mean, we've heard IT say single pane of glass, like how many times? I don't know. But actually stitching those things together for real, not in kind of this separate thing where you're kind of in like an operations center, but in a thing that makes sense where you can make correlation across events here. Okay, cool. How are we tracking? We good? Is lunch kicking in? Are we good? Any hurrahs out there? Still worried about the Lego situation? It's going to get worse. I just didn't tell you that. So, cool. Next up is eval your CI/CD pipeline. So, I have stuff that I think about, like the tools that you can put in place, and of course we all have different structures for how we're doing CI/CD. But Shannon Leitz gave this talk, and Shannon's been a speaker here before, and I really liked it when she was talking about at Intuit, she would take her pipeline, and then there's no tools on this list, but it's like questions to ask at certain phases of the pipeline. And I started thinking, yeah, it's a pretty good idea, because no one has an identical environment in this room, much less just across the industry. So how do we instead think about the types of questions we want to ask? So without further ado, let's go through a few questions at a few phases of the pipeline and just see if any of those spark any interest for you. But these are supposed to be like conversation starters to help on your team. So are developers using security locally before it gets to the CI system in the develop phase? Are we practicing good code hygiene and coding practices? Just like linting, are we doing that kind of stuff? Any sort of secret control, where we're keeping secrets out of version control. That's good. Okay, so the next phase is one that's not on many pipelines. I like it because we got to think about the SCA stuff and just like what other stuff we're building in here. So what have I put in my app, like dependencies or third-party connections that are making me vulnerable? Am I publishing a bill of materials with my application? I probably should be doing that, especially if I can. Cool. And let's see, build. Am I testing for security, low-hanging fruit? Am I arming my pipeline with attack tools to exercise the application? And have I validated the previous two steps? So the rest of the stuff has happened in your development environment, maybe on check-in. It depends on where you put your software composition stuff in the inheritance phase. But anyways, you want to make sure you're validating so you have a clean record of like, yeah, all that stuff's been done. I rerun my linters and whatever. So. Agile Application Security Book, to bring them back into this, they say that it should be the goal to come up with automated tests that check for all the security configurations and behavior, and then execute that every time the system is built and deployed. I have a course on that in LinkedIn Learning. And then the deployment phase. So what secrets are needed to move my application from development into production? Am I testing for compliance on every deploy? Could I even assert anything close to that? Is there a reasonable mechanism to push changes into production that's like repeatable, reliable, all those things? Some of these are just like good DevOps practices, and then like we can sometimes get into, like security can really take part in that, just like DevOps has done. And it's interesting to me still, like, going back to that, well, in the beginning of DevOps, we didn't even think of like CI/CD pipelines as like the most important thing. Like we were just concerned with like, can like the infrastructure be codified in a way that like a developer can interact with it. Over time, people like have kind of said, oh, DevOps, that's Jenkins, right? Or whatever. Like, it's your CI/CD or your Chef plus that. It's interesting how like our idea of like what something is changes over time, and I think we're seeing that growth as for DevSecOps as well. So, in the operation phase, are we under attack at the moment? I mentioned some stuff like that. Do we know what attackers are going for when they are coming in, or can we turn off stuff independently? So we have kill switches. If we're actively being attacked, can we shut down certain components? Are we doing any security chaos experiments to understand like if this set of actions happen, what security prevention tools and mechanisms come in place, and like can we even look at that in any sort of game day exercise or any way to look at that? All right, cool. The next piece here is building a sharing culture. So Patrick Dubois, who I mentioned a little bit earlier, they coined the term DevOps, but way back in 2014, back when people were saying DevOps with like quotey fingers, and if you still think that, that's okay too. But it was like, oh yeah, the DevOps, right? And there's a lot of questions of like could this survive? That's fine for a startup. The thinking was at the time, that's very fine for a startup when you're 10 people, but it's not going to work in the enterprise. Like, and that was like the thought. So Cutter IT Journal tasked Patrick and one of our friends, Ernest Muller, who's not here today, but he contributed to the journal on that. But it was really focusing on like, how does DevOps make it? I thought it was the first piece that really kind of tackled that question of like, how is DevOps going to make the move to the enterprise? Because right at the time it was a bunch of startups or places like Etsy or Netflix or whatever that just didn't really have like the they're not a bank, they're not healthcare, they're not oil, right? So it's like, what? Is this really going to work? For craft goods, sure, but is this going to work for a real business? And that was the question. And so in that environment, in that time, Patrick said this, and I think it's still really relevant for us today. He says, culture is the most important aspect to DevOps succeeding in the enterprise. And so that gets us thinking, like, what does culture mean? What does it mean for security? What does it mean as we think about how security plays in the DevOps space and gets into DevSecOps as we continue to see this journey across our organization? So it's having the similar understanding, trying to share in the same language, trying to come up with similar views or ways to look at problems together, putting in collaborative tooling that allows the teams to take place. So some of that stuff you probably already have. Some of it, as you're thinking about it, it's like, well, sometimes when I have a meeting with such and such team, we sort of like talk past each other, and maybe you even know, like, sometimes they do it intentionally because they're always like a real pain to deal with, right? And we've all been there, but trying to find ways to bridge the culture gap inside your organization, that's actually the hardest work of all this to do, and it's one of those things that's probably the most worthwhile. So security is only successful if it creates learning feedback from developers, for developers from all the operational data, and everything kind of in between. Like, we're trying to provide learning environments. Because the model has really shifted, right? Like my 3-tier or whatever tier application now looks like this, and I'm like, this is not good. Is anybody living with this reality right now? Yeah? No? Any hurrahs or sighs or slow claps, right? It's like, yeah, we're seeing like the breakup of all of our monolith applications or 3-tier or however you were doing it before. It's like you're probably going to a structure based like this with a split up of all the services. Okay, another one is inviting IT risk and audit to the party. So I won't get into the full details on this one, but if you're thinking about this, like Visible Ops is a great book. The Investments Unlimited book that just came out is highly recommended in here. Some of the stuff that IT Revolution put out, what's the name of that? Anyways, I can send you some links if you have other stuff, but I think Investments Unlimited is the right place to look at the moment. And then, as much as you can, try to match the cadence of developers to increase flow. So putting security tooling where that matches what developers are doing. So developers need stuff that's CI/CD native. They need meaningful results. Of course, they don't need a bunch of inactionable tickets in Jira or whatever. They need replayable findings. As things get old or get on inside of an application, it's continuing in development, and especially as you're kind of distributing into multiple like microservices and APIs and calling third-party stuff, you start becoming less concerned about the injection problems and more about abuse and misuse cases. So be looking for ways to target that, and then try to as much as you can, put all that output and target it into places where developers are already working and living. So from Slack to Jira to GitHub to whatever it is in your organization. So, okay, so that's my advice for the budding DevSecOps or person who's trying to take on the DevSecOps adventure. This is identify the people ratio mismatch and silos, build DevSecOps people, evaluate your CI/CD pipeline for security, build a sharing culture. Invite IT risk and audit, and match the cadence of developers to increase overall flow. So that's the talk. I can handle some questions, and if you have any questions or you want to copy the slides, I have a Popl on here, which is like a a fun thing that I'm trying out. But send me a thing on that, and I'll send it over to you. Cool. But that's it. Thank you for the time. Do we have any questions, or anybody want to shout something out, or bank them? Or are we? Well, I don't know. We have time. Yeah. And it's okay. Like, I realize it's post lunch, and you're like, maybe the DevSecOps. I don't know. So, yeah, sure.
Yeah, number 5. Invite IT risk knowledge to the party.
Yeah.
How do you overcome the cultural, like, how dare you? This is my party.
Oh wait, so like IT risk thinks it's their party or their party? Yeah. That's a good question. I don't know. Does everybody understand the question? Like, how do you bring in IT risk and audit into the DevSecOps journey? Yeah. Does anybody have any like success stories of how that's happened? I think that for some of the things that I try to look at is, what are their main objections, right? Like, and sometimes it's like, sometimes you got to find like the right auditor that's going to like work with you on this, and there is a change going in that group of folks where they're starting to see like, DevOps and DevSecOps, like all the digital exhaust that comes out of that, like those are really good artifacts that we can assert compliance on through. But then there's some folks that maybe focus a little bit less on that, and they focus more on like your HR controls or your whatever, right? So I'd say try to find those that are more interested in that, in the former category, bringing them on. I think the Visible Ops stuff, and then Gene's book, Visible Ops Security, had a lot of helpful things to say about that. And I'm spacing on I don't know, Boyd, where are you? I can't see it here, but I don't see it in here. I guess he's not. So that is another spot. And if you send me an email, I'll dig out. There's a white paper that's maybe like 5 years old, but like how to make some of that change inside of an organization that could be helpful as well. That came out of IT Revolution, but that predated that book, Investments Unlimited. And so like that may be the more of a canonical example for you now. So yeah. Cool. Anything else? Okay. Well, hey, I'm around, so hit me up, and thanks for y'all's time today.